The Council's arrogance, the massive war chamber aboard the Dominion's edge, hummed with the quiet power of advanced technology. Holographic star maps flickered in the center of the circular room, showing the vast territories controlled by the Galactic Coalition. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the polished obsidian table, their various forms of armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Supreme Chancellor Drex Volton stood at the head of the table, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. At the display, his purple skin seemed to glow with ambition as he addressed the gathering. The Coalition had grown powerful over the past century, absorbing smaller civilizations and expanding their influence across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Today, we discuss the next phase of our expansion, Voltan declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. The human territories lie directly in our path to the Outer Rim. These scattered colonies represent nothing more than speed bumps on our road to total galactic dominance. Murmurs of agreement echoed around the chamber. Captain Rinstella, a young Andromedan officer with silver skin and bright yellow eyes, leaned forward eagerly. His species had joined the Coalition only recently, and he was hungry to prove their worth through conquest. The humans have primitive technology compared to our advanced weapons, Stella commented, his voice filled with contempt. Our intelligence reports show they still rely on chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons. This should be a simple matter of overwhelming force. Several other officers nodded in agreement. The Coalition's military might seemed unstoppable. They possessed energy weapons that could vaporize entire city blocks, shields that could withstand nuclear explosions, and faster-than-light technology that allowed them to strike anywhere in the galaxy within days. But one figure remained silent. In the shadows, Admiral Keth Sorvak sat apart from the others, his weathered features telling the story of countless battles. The old Zephyrian had served the Coalition for over 40 years, but his scaled hide bore scars that spoke of harder-fought victories than the younger. Officers could imagine Zorvak's deep blue scales had dulled with age, and several were missing. Entirely from his left arm, where a human weapon had nearly severed the limb decades ago. His 3 eyes, arranged in a triangle on his face, watched the proceedings with growing unease. Admiral Zorvak, Chancellor Volton, suddenly called out, noticing the veteran's silence. "You've been quiet today. Surely you have thoughts on our upcoming campaign against the humans." The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the old warrior. Zorvak slowly stood, his movements careful and deliberate. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-earned experience. "I have fought humans before," he said simply. "I was there at the Battle of Kepler Station 30 years ago." Captain Stella scoffed. "That was a minor skirmish, hardly worth mentioning. The single space station, defended by a handful of humans, could hardly be considered a real battle." Zorvak's eyes fixed on the young officer, and for a moment the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Minor skirmish," he repeated. "We lost 6 warships and over 3,000 soldiers taking that station. The humans held out for 18 days with nothing but mining equipment and sheer determination." "Impossible," another officer interjected. "Our records show the station fell within hours of the initial assault." A bitter laugh escaped Zorvak's throat. "The records were altered to save face. The truth is far more disturbing." He activated his personal holographic display, showing images from the battle that most of the Coalition had never seen. The footage showed human defenders using industrial cutting torches as weapons, explosive mining charges turned into improvised bombs, and construction mechs retrofitted with armor plating and salvaged weapons. But it was not the makeshift weapons that made the images so unsettling. It was the look in the humans' eyes. They do not fight like other species, Zorvak continued. Most civilizations surrender when defeat becomes inevitable. They calculate losses and make rational decisions based on survival. Humans do not think this way. Commander Nea Cross, a junior officer from the Centauri system, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had studied human psychology as part of her military training and found their behavioral patterns ... unusual. What makes them different? She asked quietly. Zorvak's expression grew distant as he recalled memories he had tried to forget. They fight with something we do not understand. When cornered, when all hope is lost, they become more dangerous, not less. I watched a single human female hold off an entire squad of our best soldiers for 6 hours using nothing but a maintenance tool and her bare hands. One person cannot hold off an entire squad, Stella protested. She had been shot 3 times, Zorvak continued, ignoring the interruption. Her left arm was broken, and she had lost significant blood. By all logic, she should have collapsed within minutes. Instead, she used the ventilation system to move around the station, setting traps and picking off my soldiers one by one. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Several officers exchanged nervous glances, but Chancellor Volton maintained his composure. Even if your account is accurate, Admiral, that was decades ago, Volton said dismissively. The coalition has grown much stronger since then. We now field the most advanced military force in galactic history, and the humans have had 3 decades to prepare, Zorvak replied. Do you think they have been idle during that time? Stella slammed his fist on the table, his yellow eyes blazing with anger. Enough of this fear-mongering. The humans are nothing but a collection of primitive colonies scattered across a few dozen systems. They have no unified government, no advanced technology, and no real military to speak of. They have something far more dangerous than advanced weapons, Zorvak said quietly. They have the willingness to sacrifice everything for their survival. Chancellor, Volton raised one of his 4 hands for silence. The debate had gone on long enough, and he could see that Zorvak's words were beginning to unsettle some of the younger officers. Admiral Zorvak, your concerns are noted, Volton said in a tone that made it clear the discussion was over. However, the decision has already been made by the High Council. We will proceed with simultaneous strikes on 3 human colonies: New Terra, Haven's Rest, and Frontier's Edge. This will demonstrate our overwhelming superiority and force the remaining human settlements to surrender without further bloodshed. The meeting continued for another hour as tactical details were discussed. Fleet compositions were finalized, target priorities were established, and timetables were set. Through it all, Zorvak remained silent, his warnings dismissed as the paranoid ramblings of an aging soldier. As the gathering disbanded, Commander Cross approached the old admiral. She waited until they were alone before speaking. Admiral, do you really believe the humans pose a significant threat to our forces? She asked. Zorvak looked at her with his 3 eyes, and she could see genuine fear lurking beneath the surface. Commander, I have fought 7 different species across 40 systems. I have seen civilizations crumble and empires fall. But I have never encountered anything like human desperation. What do you mean? Most species fight for territory, resources, or political gain. Humans fight for something else entirely: the right to exist as free beings. When you threaten their families, their homes, their way of life, they become capable of things that defy all military logic. Cross nodded slowly, but Zorvac could see the doubt in her eyes. She was young and had never faced defeat. Like the others, she believed in the Coalition's invincibility. "Mark my words," Commander Zorvac said as he prepared to leave. "This war will not end the way the Chancellor believes. The humans will surprise us, and we will pay a terrible price for our arrogance." 2 days later, Admiral Zorvac was quietly reassigned to an administrative position on the Outer Rim. His decades of loyal service were rewarded with exile, his warnings buried beneath layers of bureaucratic protocol. The Coalition war machine began to move. 3 massive fleets assembled at different staging points, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. The commanders were confident, the soldiers eager for easy victory, and the politicians already counting the spoils of conquest. None of them noticed the subtle changes in deep space communication patterns. Human merchant ships had begun altering. Their routes, seemingly random cargo transfers, were taking place at remote stations, and civilian traffic to the 3 target colonies had increased dramatically over the past month. The humans were not idle. They had been preparing for this moment ever since the Coalition's first probe entered their territory, and unlike their enemies, they understood that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from superior weapons, but from the unbreakable will to defend what matters most. As the Coalition fleets jumped to hyperspace, heading toward what they believed would be an easy conquest, a single message was transmitted from Earth's defense headquarters to every human colony, ship, and outpost in the galaxy. The message was simple: remember who we are. When humanity fights back, the first explosions lit up the dawn sky over New Terra like deadly fireworks. Coalition warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their energy weapons lancing down to strike what intelligence had identified as primary military installations. The attack was textbook perfect, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Colonel Sarah Chen watched the bombardment from the emergency command bunker, buried deep beneath New Terra's capital city. The reinforced concrete walls shook with each impact, and dust rained from the ceiling as the Coalition demonstrated their technological superiority. "Status report," Chen ordered calmly, her voice cutting through the chaos in the command center. "Primary spaceport is gone," reported Lieutenant Davis, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple tactical displays. "Mining complex took a direct hit. They're targeting infrastructure and military positions, but civilian areas appear to be untouched so far." Chen nodded grimly. The Coalition was following standard conquest doctrine: cripple the enemy's ability to fight back while minimizing civilian casualties to ease the transition to occupation. It was logical, efficient, and exactly what human military analysts had predicted. "Begin Phase 2, Chen commanded. Across New Terra, hidden speakers crackled to life with a simple announcement: "Attention, all civilians. Evacuation Protocol 7 is now in effect. All non-combatants should proceed immediately to designated safe zones." This is not a drill. The Coalition commanders watched with satisfaction as streams of human civilians began fleeing the cities. This was normal behavior for a conquered population. Seek safety and wait for the fighting to end. What they failed to notice were the small groups that separated from the main evacuation routes, carrying unmarked cases and heading toward seemingly abandoned buildings. Captain Marcus Torres crouched in the rubble of what had once been New Terra primary communications hub. His unit of 43 defenders had been tasked with holding the facility as long as possible. But the Coalition's orbital bombardment had made that mission impossible within the first hour of the attack. Most military commanders would have ordered a retreat at this point. The position was untenable. The enemy had overwhelming firepower, and continuing to fight would only result in meaningless casualties. Marcus Torres was not most military commanders. "Johnson, what's the status on those mining charges?" he called out to his demolitions expert. Sergeant Johnson looked up from the improvised explosive device he was assembling. "Give me 10 more minutes, sir. This baby will take out anything that tries to land in the main plaza." "Wilson, how are we looking on those defensive positions?" Corporal Wilson wiped sweat from her forehead as she finished connecting power cables to a repurposed construction mech. The 20-foot-tall machine had been designed for moving heavy materials at mining sites. Now it bristled with armor plating and improvised weapons. "The mech is ready, Captain. Not pretty, but it'll punch holes in anything smaller than a main battle tank." Torres smiled grimly. Standard military doctrine said his force was defeated. Human stubbornness said otherwise. 300 miles away, Dr. Elena Vasquez was having a very different kind of battle. The Coalition had landed ground forces at Haven's Rest, and they were advancing through the city with methodical efficiency. Their power armor was impressive: energy shields, integrated weapon systems, and advanced sensors that should have made them nearly invincible against primitive human weapons. Dr. Vasquez had spent the last 15 years studying exotic physics at the colony's research facility. She understood energy fields, particle interactions, and electromagnetic theory better than almost anyone in human space. She also understood how to make those fancy shields completely useless. "Are you certain this will work?" asked Private Reynolds, looking nervously at the device Dr. Vasquez had cobbled together from laboratory equipment and spare parts from the facility's fusion reactor. "The theoretical principles are sound," she replied, making final adjustments to what looked like a cross between a radar dish and a microwave oven. "Coalition shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They're not designed to handle a focused electromagnetic pulse that resonates at the same frequency as their field generators. And if you're wrong..." Dr. Vasquez looked up at the young soldier with a smile that didn't quite hide her own uncertainty. "Then we'll find out together." The Coalition advance unit rounded the corner in perfect formation. 12 soldiers in gleaming power armor, their weapons sweeping for targets. They moved with the confidence of a force that had never faced serious resistance from primitive opponents. Dr. Vasquez activated her device. The electromagnetic pulse was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediate and devastating. Coalition energy shields flickered and died, their sophisticated armor suddenly reduced to heavy metal suits. Warning lights flashed on their helmets as systems failed across the board. "Now," Dr. Vasquez shouted, human defenders emerged from concealment and opened fire with conventional weapons. Without their shields, the Coalition soldiers were vulnerable. Within seconds, half the squad was down, and the survivors were retreating in confusion. High above the planet, Coalition fleet commanders watched the developing ground battle with growing concern. The initial bombardment had proceeded exactly as planned, but the ground assault was encountering unexpected difficulties. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all 3 colonies," reported the communications officer aboard the flagship. "Ground forces are meeting heavier resistance than anticipated." Admiral Drexel Vaughan, commander of the new Terror Task Force, frowned at the tactical display. "Define heavier resistance. Are we talking about organized military units or just scattered?" pockets of insurgents. It's difficult to classify, sir. The humans appear to be using unconventional tactics. Our forces report encountering improvised weapons, modified industrial equipment, and what can only be described as engineering creativity. Before Admiral Vaughn could respond, the flagship's sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching. From the outer system, the Coalition had expected possible human reinforcements, but these readings were off the charts. New contacts bearing 27 Mark IV, the sensor officer announced. Multiple vessels, configuration unknown. The main screen flickered to life, showing the approaching human fleet. What they saw defied everything the Coalition thought they knew about human military capability. The ships were massive, larger than anything in the Coalition database. But they were also clearly improvised, constructed from what appeared to be cargo haulers, mining vessels, and civilian transports. Fusion drives that belonged on freight ships had been strapped to hulls, never designed for combat. Asteroid processing equipment had been converted into weapons systems. It should have been laughable. Instead, Admiral Vaughn felt a chill run down his spine. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the converted asteroid processor Defiant Resolution. The ship had been a civilian mining vessel just 6 months ago. Now it carried enough firepower to level a city and the determination of a crew that had watched their homes come under attack. All ships, this is Morrison, he broadcast to his improvised fleet. Remember, we're not here to win a pretty victory. We're here to make them regret ever coming to human space. The Coalition fleet moved to intercept their advanced warships, forming up in textbook battle formations. They had superior technology, better weapons, and decades of military experience. What they didn't have was the raw, desperate fury of a species fighting for survival. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations to come, assuming any Coalition officers survived to write the reports. Human ships dove into the enemy formation with no regard for their own safety, ramming Coalition vessels when their improvised weapons weren't enough. A converted or freighter called Holmes Defender took direct hits from 3 Coalition destroyers, but kept fighting until its fusion reactor finally gave out. As it died, its captain managed to ram his ship into the Coalition flagship's engine section, crippling the much larger vessel. On the ground, the pattern was repeating across all 3 colonies. Human defenders used every advantage they could find: knowledge of local terrain, improvised weapons, and a willingness to sacrifice that their enemies couldn't understand or counter. Captain Torres watched from his improvised command post as Coalition forces attempted to secure the main plaza. The mining charges Sergeant Johnson had placed were hidden throughout the area, waiting for the perfect moment. 50 meters and closing, reported Corporal Wilson from her position in the modified construction mech. Torres waited. Coalition doctrine called for overwhelming force applied quickly to minimize casualties on both sides. The enemy was bunching up their forces for a decisive assault, exactly as human tacticians had hoped they would. 30 meters, 20 meters. Now, Torres shouted. The plaza erupted in a chain of explosions as mining charges designed to shatter solid rock tore through Coalition battle armor. The construction mech emerged from its concealment, its industrial cutting torch slicing through enemy weapons like a lightsaber through paper. Similar scenes played out across all 3 colonies. Humans turned their mining equipment into weapons, their knowledge of local geography into tactical advantages, and their refusal to surrender into a force multiplier that no amount of advanced technology could overcome. 6 hours after the assault began, Coalition forces were in full retreat from all 3 human colonies. Admiral Vaughan's flagship limped back to hyperspace, with a third of his fleet destroyed or disabled. The other task force commanders reported similar losses, but the most damaging blow came in the form of a message transmitted on all Coalition frequencies. The image showed Colonel Sarah Chen standing in the ruins of New Terra's communication hub, surrounded by captured Coalition weapons and the wreckage of enemy vehicles. To the Galactic Coalition High Command, she began, her voice calm and steady. Despite the smoke and destruction visible behind her, you came to our worlds believing we were weak. You saw our primitive technology and assumed we would be easy prey. The camera panned across scenes of Coalition soldiers in human prisoner-of-war camps. Their advanced armor stripped away, their confidence shattered. You were wrong, Chen continued. We may not have your energy weapons or your fancy shields, but we have something you'll never understand, the willingness to fight for our freedom, no matter the cost. The image shifted to show human civilians returning to their damaged cities, already beginning the work of rebuilding. Children played in the rubble while their parents cleared debris and repaired what could be salvaged. This is our home. These are our families, and we will defend them with everything we have, for as long as it takes. The transmission ended with a simple statement that would become legendary throughout human space. We are humanity. We do not surrender. In the Coalition capital, Chancellor Volton watched the message with growing horror. 3 of his most powerful fleets had been defeated by a collection of primitive colonies using mining equipment and sheer determination. In his exile on the Outer Rim, Admiral Zorvac received a copy of the battle reports. He read them with grim satisfaction, though he took no pleasure in being proven right. The Coalition had learned the hard way what he had tried to tell them, that humans were unlike any enemy they had ever faced. The war was far from over. The Coalition still possessed superior numbers and technology, but they had lost something far more valuable than ships and soldiers. They had lost their certainty of victory, and in the depths of human space, in mining colonies and research stations, in civilian workshops and military bunkers, humanity was preparing for the next phase of a war they had never wanted but would fight to the bitter end. Because that's what humans do when everything they love is threatened. They fight back.